Hey there YouTube! So in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I wanted to share the story of how I met the goddess Nanna for the first time. So before I get into this, I want to preface with two things. The first is that deity communication looks different for everybody. This is true whether you are a pagan polytheist, a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a Hindu. However you communicate with the gods that you work with or the gods that you worship is going to be a deeply personal choice and experience. You might find that you connect with them through prayer or music or journaling. You might have a psychic ability like clairaudience. For me, my communication with the gods that I work with has always come mostly in the form of dream visions. So yes, this is the story of a dream that I had. However, the way that I distinguish between a regular dream and a deity communication, a very spiritual experience, is critical, and I will get into that a little later. The second thing I want to preface with is that I cannot emphasize enough how little I knew about Norse pagan gods, any Nordic folklore. I didn't know anything. So my grandfather's family on my mother's side was from the Scottish Highlands. And if you know anything about the Scottish Highlands, it is a very lovely tapestry of Irish, Scottish, Celtic, and Norse spiritual tradition and folklore. This was created by centuries of Northern European trade and travel and settlement. So of course I've always had an interest in this pretty wide range of traditions, but I had decided very early on not to engage with any of it. The reason for this is that my grandfather was a pretty bad dude, and I felt that if I engaged in that area or any of those traditions, I would be somehow giving his soul more vibrance in my life, and I didn't want that. Ancestor work is definitely part of what I do, and he was an ancestor I did not want anything to do with. And so engaging with the landscape or the beings or the spirits or the traditions of the land that birthed him, it kind of disturbed me and was something I just kind of shut off. So even though I've been attracted to and drawn to like the Morrigan and Breed and Freya, I didn't do anything about it, because no way. So all that said, this is how Nanna appeared to me. So a few years ago, I was living in Japan. It was a normal Saturday night. We were out, my husband and I, with a friend of ours. We were wandering the streets, having beers, going dancing, bar hopping, as one does. It's about 2 or 3 in the morning, and instead of taking a taxi back to our apartment, the friend we were hanging out with invited us to come back to her apartment. So we accepted, and we went back to her place, and I very quickly passed out. I was exhausted. As usual, my dreams were the mix of reality and fantasy one would expect, woven into interesting narratives that had some spunk. I'm always very aware of when I'm dreaming, but I typically enjoy them for that, a bit of uncanny valley kind of vibe. But the last dream I was having, I was standing in the grocery store with my husband arguing about salmon. We were going to buy one of these salmon to take to a barbecue the next day at like a roller coaster park. And so we were bickering about this, and I hear this sort of thunder or crackle kind of sound above me. I look up, and there is this colossal figure of an old man. He had these wrinkles and crevices in his skin that were like tree bark, this like wiry beard. He almost reminded me of those Enchanted Forest coloring books from the 70s. I observed him for a few moments, and then I just said, "I'm busy," and went back to bickering about salmon. He ignored this, and he reached down, and with a thumb and an index finger, he picked me up by the shoulders and just plucked me out of the dream and brought me into a new realm. So this is where it gets a little interesting. This was not a dreamscape anymore, this realm that I was kind of plucked into. I became completely aware of myself as a soul. I became completely aware of where my body was down on earth on the futon at my friend's house. I became aware of the dream that I had just been plucked from, and I wanted to go back to it. I was a little bit irritated that I was there, but at the same time, I knew that I had been to this place before. I don't want to say it was like an astral realm or some other plane that people might be familiar with. I really don't know, but it was something that was familiar but unexplored. A place I didn't know the boundaries of, but I was familiar with this sort of platform that I was perched on. And so before me, is this colossal figure of the man, And there was also this massive scroll kind of hanging in the ether. He tapped it and it kind of descended, it unfurled, and it was made of this like white linen, and it was covered in these gorgeous illustrations. It was a lot like black ink illustrations, but instead of ink, it was woven. It was like black thread embroidery. All these figures were connected by tree roots and vines and geometric patterns. It was a very interwoven, sort of three-pillared design. And I didn't really know what I was doing here. I was like very irritated. I said, "What do you want?" multiple times. And so this man figure, he pointed to an illustration that was about a third of the way down from the top of the scroll. That was in the middle column of figures. And it was him. The illustration was the same old man with, he was kind of holding an orb on his knee, and he had one eye, and I understood, oh, this is Odin. So I said that. I said, "Oh, you are Odin." He didn't say anything. He just kind of nodded and just pulled his massive hand away from this illustration, this tapestry. And so honestly, I was a little like not pleased about this. At the time, there was a lot going on in the pagan community about, you know, white supremacist groups co-opting Norse and Germanic paganism and kind of making Odin their god. And so I kind of crossed my arms and wanted to have a conversation about this. I was very, I like waiting for a moment where I could place some blame on him. It was very childish. Don't even ask. So I said, "What am I doing here?" in an annoyed voice, and he didn't say anything. And I said, "Seriously, what am I doing here?" I felt very defensive in that moment. Then further down the tapestry, on kind of the bottom-ish, right? Not all the way at the bottom, but toward the bottom, on the right-hand side, he pointed to this embroidered illustration of a woman. She had dark hair, and it was long, probably to her knees. She was surrounded by flowers. She had a very youthful face, a very soft presence. There was a lot of feminine joy about her. There was kind of like this moon crescent thing around her head. And he said, "This is Nanna." And I said, "No, it's not." And he said again, "This is Nanna." And I said, "No, it's not. Inanna is a Mesopotamian goddess. She has nothing to do with you." God, why am I like this? And he said it again, "This is Nanna." To which I said, in a very snarky voice with my arms crossed, "Nanna is nothing like this, and she's too fierce to be a flower girl." Yeah, like, whatever. I was given some sass. But Odin didn't care. He didn't even flinch. He, I'm like this puny little human soul in front of this colossal cloud-like man figure, right? He didn't give a fuck. But he pulled away, and as he did, and as he kind of retreated into the background of this, like, ether realm space, the illustration he had pointed to began to move, and from it emerged the woman in a more ethereal form. She no longer black and white and embroidered. She was like this full-color embodied spirit. She had long, dark brown hair. The fronts were kind of gathered here with like almost like a satiny burlappy kind of ribbon, and the rest was left to hang loose. She had a gorgeous blue dress on that was kind of had a high neck and long draping sleeves. She had a beautiful presence about her, one that I could only compare to maybe encountering royalty. But she was very simple at the same time, almost humble. And she smiled at me and said, "I am Nanna." She said it kind of in a slower voice and like a very gentle way. And it clicked like, oh, they weren't talking about Inanna. Like, I feel bad now. This is somebody else. So I stared at her in awe and I apologized. And she smiled at me again and kind of like almost laughed and opened her mouth to say something. And I woke up. I woke up to my husband and my friend in the kitchen making coffee and eggs, and I was like, what the hell was that? What just happened? That was so weird. I reached my phone to Google Nanna because I had no idea if this was a real thing or not, or just like something I made up in my head. My phone was dead, so I plugged it in, had coffee and eggs, and we very quickly were like out the door to go do some shopping and stuff. So the whole morning I kind of just faked being hungover because I didn't really want to talk about it yet. It was a very like intense experience. When you come out of these kinds of visions or experiences or deep dreams, they don't have the same energy that a dream might leave that lingers on you. It's much more like you have to reground yourself. There's a sense of like your soul just crashed back into your body and you're reorienting. And so I spent the morning kind of just going about things as they were, planning to get home and Google this thing and deal with it then. So that afternoon when we did get home, it's exactly what I did. And when I saw that Nanna was in fact not only a real name of a goddess, but a Norse goddess, I had to like go take a bath. I was really stunned. This was the first time something like this had happened to me where I was introduced to, in a kind of a psychic-y way, or in a spiritual way, a being that I had not previously known existed. It'd be one thing, right, if I was spending my time reading a lot about Bast and I had some Bast dreams, you'd be like, oh, that makes sense. But to be plucked out of a dream and introduced to a figure that I'd never heard of, did not know anything about, and then later that day be confirmed, like, yes, that was real. This is a real goddess with the same imagery that you saw in your dream. It was very interesting. It was a very kind of stunning experience. Definitely also confirmed for me that I'm happy to be a pagan. Definitely the religion for me, but still, I needed to process that in my body, in my stomach. So that was really cool. What wasn't so cool was that I dedicated a bunch of hours trying to find out information about her, and there was nothing. I went on Norse pagan forums, I read every encyclopedia article I could find, I looked for blogs, but the information was always the same. Nanna, goddess of love, wife of Balder, associated with joy and the moon. The most interesting thing I could find was that some archaeologists found a comb that may or may not have an inscription about her on it, which kind of goes with like the really cool hair that she had, I guess. So I wanted to share all this because this is an example of, I think, what a lot of pagans go through is they might encounter visions or signs or experiences that lead them to believe that a certain god or goddess is calling to them. This, to me, really felt like Nanna was calling to me in a way that I hadn't experienced a god or goddess calling to me before. However, I had that like ancestral blockage to work through. I really didn't want to learn a whole new tradition. So I kept it really simple. I just lit a candle for her, left some flowers and a glass of water, and just said, thank you for visiting me. I didn't feel ready for anything beyond that. And over the last few years, I haven't felt ready to engage with anything Norse. I have been dabbling in like adding Celtic pagan traditions into my practice, and that's been very great. So I don't think that I'm never going to approach Nanna, because this whole time she has been on my mind. I draw her a lot. Sometimes I feel like she's around as like this sort of like a spirit that's wanting to be engaged with. But it's been probably, I think, almost 3 years now, and I haven't and don't really intend to devote myself or devote an altar to her in any way at this time. But I am open to that changing. So if you are a pagan who's had a god or goddess call out to you before, you have permission to say no if you're not ready for a relationship or for a relationship with that particular being, or if you just don't want one at all. I do occasionally light candles for her here and there, and I am really grateful for such a cool experience. You know, I've only had one other experience that tops that, and I will probably share that in another video. But definitely one of the coolest things to have ever happened to me as a polytheist. If you were there and you saw the look on my face when I Googled Nanna Norse goddess and it was a real thing. My husband kept questioning me, like, are you sure you haven't read about this before? Are you sure you just forgot? You didn't just forget? And I was like, no, for real, dude. Like, I did not. Like, I knew about Freya, Odin, and Frigg, and that's it. So that's how I met Nanna, and that's how I didn't really do anything with that. And that's okay. I am eclectic. I don't have any problem being an eclectic pagan, but I do like to be a little bit careful and mindful about what kinds of things I mix in my practice. And I don't feel ready to mix anything Norse quite yet. And so if you have ever worked with Nanna, or you've experienced her, or if you worship her, I would love to hear about that relationship. If you don't want to leave anything in a public comment below, please reach out to me on Instagram through a DM or something like that, because I I really would love to hear more about her from people who work with her because there's so little information available online. I'd also love to hear about any experiences that you have had where you may have had a god or goddess come to you either in a dream or through a vision or through some other kind of communication. Also, you know, I don't want to imply that like this is the way that you have to find a god or goddess. A lot of the ones that I work with did not come to me in this way at all. I found them online and like I started the relationship. I think this is a pretty rare thing to have happen, and it's really cool when it does. So I'd love to hear your story. So I'm going to go enjoy my evening, and I hope you have a wonderful, blessed week and you're taking care of yourself, and I'll see you in a few days. Bye.